So Seth, you asked me to speak, and I wondered, why would a guy like you ask a guy like me to speak at your Eagle ceremony? And I thought, well, the real reason is most of the adventures we've had in Scouting. But you and I only had like 2 years. So I went back and looked, all my Scout photos, I think it was 17, 18, summer camp. You were just a little snot-nosed kid, just out of your mom's grasp, because she was your pack leader, right? So you were just out of her grasp when you went to Scout camp. So you only had like 2 years. You were a good kid then. I don't know what's happened since, but you were a good kid. But I don't know what happened because I had to take my leave of Scouting. So I thought, I'm going to pull your individual history in Troop Master. Because when I left, you were doing pretty good. As a matter of fact, when I left, I looked, and you had almost achieved Star Scout Award in less than 2 years. You were first class in less than 2 years and only had a couple of things to do to finish your star. And then I looked, and it was more than 5 years before you finished your Eagle. What do you think that's called? Procrastination. And if you remember in your personal management merit badge, procrastination is called the thief of time. It stole big time from you, Seth. And I thought, you know what? You came in about the same time Brett did. You know Brett Law? I thought maybe you're on a Brett Law plan. So I pulled his scout record. For some reason, your scout leader has left my password in so I can get all the record I want. So I looked, and no, that wasn't right, because it took Brett 5.5 years to make it past second class. And only about 1.5 years to finally get Eagle. But that's for a story in about 2 weeks. Okay, so you weren't on the Brett Law plan, you were on your own plan. So I thought, I got to write down the things I've done in that 5 years since I've been out of Scouting, and you apparently have been in Scouting but procrastinating. Obviously, you weren't motivated enough. So, you weren't on the Brett Law plan. I thought, what's a guy like you asking a guy like me to speak for? Because obviously, you don't know the things that I've accomplished in those 5 years, or the 50 before that. Just like we were talking a little bit to Ben. Ben is not quite like you, is he? He got his Eagle at 14. But we're not talking about Ben. In those 5 years, I've had 2 grandkids. And one can read already, Seth. And write. I can show you some of the writing. And you barely got your Eagle. I've had 2 knee surgeries. One I'm replaced. And I can walk just fine, and I can run just fine. Not quite run. And you just barely got your Eagle. Then I looked in this system, and it says, you haven't even had your board review. And I looked at Brett's, and it hasn't either. And then I realized an entire Scouting system has been replaced in 5 years. And you didn't get your Eagle. So let's talk about some motivation. And you know why Mr. Brown and others asked me to give the Eagle charge? That's right here. Almost 50 years ago, I stood in the same place you did. Okay? I'm not the bald guy there. I'm the other one. Just making sure you know. There's a difference. So, I stood in the same place. Once an Eagle, always an Eagle. Okay? So I usually give the Eagle charge. But I thought, what's the difference between a guy like you and a guy like me? I thought, motivation. You obviously haven't had the right motivation. So I thought back from that guy in the photo, the one with the hair. I thought, what motivated him? He finished college in 3.5 years. He was the youngest plant controller ever for the second largest glass company in the world. And the youngest director of finance for Whirlpool Corporation, and the youngest to build a plant out here in Wausau. So what's the difference between you and I? Motivation. That's what you should say. Motivation. So that kid, or young man in that photo, he didn't even take his SATs or his ACTs. He was a C student. Out of 350 kids in his class, he was in the lower half. He didn't have motivation either. After he got his Eagle Scout award, he was working in a grocery store at 3 in the morning with a 55-year-old man who was throwing up 50 pounds of bags of dog food, stacked them up 6 feet high. And he looked at that guy, and he was younger than me. And he said, when I'm his age, I want to be home in bed with my wife, not doing this at 3 in the morning. That gave me motivation. That gave me motivation to go out and apply to colleges that would take a young man who didn't take SATs or ACTs because he wasn't going to school. So as a provisional student, they let me in. But I had to get straight A's to stay a provisional student. That's motivation. I only had enough money for 3.5 years. If I didn't finish in 3.5 years, I wouldn't be going back to college. I had to work 32 hours a week, go to school full time, and wrestled college wrestling. My advisor said, you can't take 22 credit hours a semester. I said, well, you pay for full time, you pay for part time. He said, nobody takes 22 hours. I convinced him to let me try. He said, okay, if you take one of my senior level classes, and if you get straight A's your first semester, I won't question you again. That's motivation. I did it. I took my next semester, 23 credit hours to him. He said, why are you taking more? He said, you don't have but 4 hours a day to sleep. I said, it's motivation. 23, you said you'd sign it. He signed it and he said, son, just leaving my mailbox from now on. I'll see you graduation. That's motivation. That young man, just like you, waited until the last week before he was 18 to turn in his Eagle Scout papers. He didn't have the motivation then. But that was one mountain climbed, and now you've climbed the same one. I encourage you, find the motivation, stick to it, and there's nothing you can't do as long as you've got the right motivation. You shouldn't need mom and dad to push you. You shouldn't need your scout leaders to push you. You got to find the right motivation right here for what it is you want to do. And when you do, you'll do it.